Paul McCartney doesn't have the education about the 60s that would be necessary to understand any particular detail about what happened to me beyond that he was the mastermind of the attacks. In other words, his false face knows nothing. I'll give you a couple examples. When I was about 10 years old, over the objections of Mayor Flaherty, Penny Crary of Pittsburgh's Jewish rumor mills, she was a psychologist at the University of Pittsburgh, took me to see the Broadway musical Hair. So there was a sharp division between the city's municipal government and the counterculture regarding whether or not children should be allowed to go to see this adult venture. And the University of Pittsburgh, working with Mr. McIntosh and Dr. Marshall and the Brecker family, set up to use me in an environment of brutally vicious and violent sexual coercion for child sexual exploitation purposes. They brutally tortured me and had adult women who I couldn't even identify using me for sex. But they produced a police foil. Deanna Mancine was working with the Pittsburgh police on this group project, as Greg called it. Greg Carl wrote, "The initial encounter of the X motive is tainted by the shadow of the adversary. He was a darling of Pittsburgh Catholic." And that's precisely the description they set up by having a woman who had already slept with Nicholas DeBarno seduce me for blackmail and slavery purposes. So the Beatles sided with the people who were behind the AIDS attack. That's common knowledge. Anybody who examines the case book can see that. And they violated the history books by making it look like they were only working with the people they claimed killed John Lennon. That's all they were doing. How can they be impeached for working with the people who they claim killed John Lennon? It gets mortifying when you look at the fact that there was nowhere to appeal. I tried appealing to Peter Gabriel, to Amnesty International, the Humanist Society, the University of Pittsburgh. Wesley Podswar took a fit when he saw that I was trying to get help from the brutal, insane vivisection experiment that I had been earmarked for by Michael Todd, Milton Shapp, and Robert Fripp when I was just a grade school child. Someone who was a pretty blonde boy who was set up on an altar as a sacrificial pig by the McManuses to slaughter. And they didn't teach me sign language until after they were finished with me. And they exploited the neurotrauma. Now, as for the issue of hooligans who were racist, I was the target of these hooligans. They were slaughtering me. They were murdering people and threatening to murder me. I, of course, knew the songs from Hair cover to cover. I knew what the words that were being used meant. Now, the criminally insane allege that my 10-year-old brain was not the master of all of the hypocrisy, all the hypocritical mystique of every band and every personality in their 20s and 30s exerting great force on our divided, strange, paranoid culture. I couldn't understand what was going on. I was deaf. And therefore, they had the right to withhold sign language from me. As for my judgment they refuse to stop racing the cars they pick me up in. There's nothing I can do to stop them. They are determined to keep me in unsafe conditions. But I refused to drive, even though I was given a driver's license, because of the neurotrauma they refuse to admit I have, because it would impeach them for allowing a neuropsychiatrist named Wadmaker from Attica State Prison to experiment on the child of senior faculty, just as they allowed Mackenzie Shirilla to be used in a car bombing after the East Palestine vinyl solution incident. We're dealing with corrections authorities who are working with Access Hollywood in extermination programs. Now, supposedly the victim of all of this is Ronald Reagan. Supposedly, according to Paul McCartney, the victim is Ronald Reagan. So they pull out the Trump from the bottom of the deck, which they mysteriously always seem to have as an override system, particularly when Michael Reagan wants his favorite scene some more.